So for those of you who don't know, Jim Hurricane Hayward has been doing the Atomic Grog for, I think it's the 10th anniversary this year. Coming up
10th
on
anniversary for this month.
this month, awesome. So yeah, Jim lives in South Florida, and when the Mai Kai was open, pre-pandemic, he was there on a very regular basis, and he's kind of reverse engineered pretty much the majority of the rum list there, or the cocktail list. And so if you check out the Atomic Grog, in addition to all his tribute recipes, there's lots of tiki news, events, things that are going on in the tiki world. So yeah, Jim.
I'm actually still there on a regular basis, even though it's closed. They've been doing events, and there's going to be another one in a couple of weeks. They do car shows and they do other things in the parking lot, but you can pick up the cocktails. So it's a nice perk to be a local. People always ask, can you get those cocktails shipped across this country? But unfortunately, no. But anyway, yeah, atomicgrog.com, that's my blog, 10 years this month. And I've been blogging about tiki and cocktails and a whole lot of other stuff concerning Polynesian pop and the tiki revival. My journey at the Mai Kai began a long time ago. I just got hooked on those cocktails and just the whole experience, which we're going to get into real quick here. But as far as the blog goes, what happened is I launched the Atomic Grog in April 2011, and I needed some kind of hook to get people in. So I thought, well, I know the Mai Kai, I know the cocktails. I've already been like compiling a rating system, because people always ask, what's the best drink? It's the Zombie, by the way. So I just started compiling these lists and put them up on Tiki Central. That led to the blog, and it led to me down a rabbit hole that still continues to this day. What I'm doing is dissecting each of the Mai Kai's cocktails. And Mike, you can go to that second slide now. The first cocktail I actually reviewed on the blog back in June of 2011 was the Barrel of Rum. And actually, Barrel of Rum is a secret recipe. This is not the actual recipe. There was a recipe published by Beachbum Berry in Taboo Table. I don't know how many people have that book. It's one of his lesser known books, but the Taboo Table recipe was the one I posted on the blog, and it was up there for years. And it's a good recipe, but it's a little bit out of proportion, wouldn't you say, Mike?
Yeah, the Beachbum Berry, or the one that was in Taboo Table, was pretty much equal proportion cocktails. It was 2 ounces of your dark rum, 2 ounces of your light rum, 2 ounces of your lime juice, OJ, passion fruit, and so on. So it was easy to batch up. So
right.
This is cuts some of the juices back, and I think makes a really nice balance.
Yeah, the thing is, he called for he had the rum exactly right. 2 ounces of white and 2 ounces of dark Jamaican. Did he call for the specific rums or not? I don't think he did.
I think it might have just said dark and white.
Yeah, just a dark Jamaican. And we were left to our own devices to figure that out. So after I posted that, I started posting other recipes, and you can go back to the slides, I guess, right? The barrel was the first, but then within a year, I had posted every recipe or every cocktail, let's put it that way. I didn't post recipes. I posted every cocktail with a review. And basically, most of the Mai Kai drinks go back to Don the Beachcomber. So all I had to do is look in all of Beachbum Berry's books and kind of try to figure out backwards which Mai Kai drink matched which Don Beach drink, and then try to dissect it from there. The barrel is the most iconic, however, because it's the image you see of the Mai Kai. It's like their signature drink. So that was an important one. Many years later, I started doing these tribute recipes, and I got good enough, I guess, to kind of figure out what was in the drink. So I was coming up with my own takes, and this is my latest take on the barrel. Like, it was posted on the blog last April, and I think it's pretty accurate. I mean, I'm tasting it next to the real deal, and it's kind of, it's as close as I'm going to get. It's impossible to completely duplicate a Mai Kai cocktail, but this is pretty close. So I hope you enjoy it. The barrel, of course, is an iconic, like I said, go back one. It's been on the Mai Kai's menu since day one, the 1956 menu up there in the upper left. Mike did the math there. It looks cheap, but you know, it's an expensive drink at the time. It had 4 ounces of rum in it, you know, so it had quite a kick. And over the years, the prices have increased. These are from their menus. The current one down there in the bottom right, currently, or when the Mai Kai reopens, it'll probably be $17 for the drink or $30 with the mug, which I think is a great deal. I would just go for that. You can also get the mugs in the gift shop. Now, it's pretty much just a riff on Don's recipe. So if you go back and look at Don the Beachcomber's rum barrel in Sippin' Safari, there's a complicated version. The Mai Kai's is a little more simplified, I think. And if you have it, it's a rare book. There's a Don Beach cocktail book by Phoebe Beach that has a rum barrel recipe in it as well. And I like that one, actually, as better of Don's recipes. So the Mai Kai leans heavily on the barrel, and you know, it's used at special events like the this Christmas event that's on the next page. We had the pleasure of having the barrel before Christmas in the holiday season of 2019. They've done other barrels over the years. I'm not crazy about some of the takes they've done. The vodka barrel, unfortunately, is popular because for whatever reason, I don't know why, people don't want to have rum in their rum barrels. So there's a need to have a vodka barrel, but that's just a variation. And they, you know, you want to sell as many drinks as you can, so that's fine. They've had past versions with coconut rum and other things. I think by request, you can get a whiskey in your barrel. You could get tequila. It's that versatile a drink that, you know, it could handle just about any spirit. There was also a barrel called the Grandfather barrel that sort of had iconic status. It was only served for a few years. It was a mix of aged rums that they put into the barrel, and that was sort of like a premium barrel. You can't get that one anymore. What happened, of course, during the pandemic, you know, we had to pivot, and the Mai Kai, you know, took advantage of the opportunity and started doing drinks to go, which they had never done before. Nobody had ever been able to get drinks to go from the Mai Kai, let alone gallons of drinks to go from the Mai Kai. So it was sort of like, you know, for people like me, it was an incredible opportunity. So I was picking up gallons all the time. This was back in the early months of the pandemic, and as you can see there, the prices were just, you know, you think $80, that's a lot, but look at what you get in that gallon. So,
hey Jim.
Yeah.
Besides the rum barrel, what other gallons do they have to go?
They've regularly done the Mai Tai, which is probably their second most popular drink, the Jet Pilot, and the Black Magic. Those are the 4 they had on Sunday. And they'll continue to have those at all the special events. If you make your way down here over the summer and go to one of their special events, they'll have those 4 drinks by the gallon or by the quart. They added quarts later. During the early days of the pandemic, they had a few others they were offering, but I think they're sticking to those 4 just for now, for simplicity's sake. I mean, we'll talk about it later, but their kitchen got crushed. You know, they're operating at you know, on minimal speed. So it's just great that we can get these barrels. But during the pandemic days last year, it was a, you know, big business opportunity. So that's what inspired the latest version of the recipe. I just took the gallon home and started examining it and tweaking it. And the previous version that I had on the blog had was pretty much the same stuff, but I just kicked back and used less lime, less grapefruit, less passion, less bitters. I upped the honey a little bit. And I balanced the drink at 10 ounces. So I guess we're drinking half-ounce versions, half-size versions now, but a full barrel is 10 ounces of juice. And they use the snifter glasses when the barrel mugs are sold out. So the snifter drinks, which include the Black Magic, are all 10 ounces as well. So at a consistency's sake, I just kind of tried to balance all those drinks at 10 ounces. And I think I'm onto something. I think I've got it pretty much balanced out now. Now, before we get into the history, Mike, do you want me to show some of the mugs here? So, you know, this is the barrel we're talking about. This is the iconic rum barrel. There are multiple versions. This is a tiki farm barrel, and if you hunt them out in the wild, you'll find different versions. This one's a little darker glaze, and it's weird. On the bottom, it just gives a phone number to call to order it. I've never actually called that phone number. I'm curious to see what'll happen. And this one's even darker glaze. And this might be the most recent I've seen there. It just has the Mai Kai logo on the back. And this is a great one. It's not officially sanctioned, but Tiki Diablo often does Mai Kai mugs. I don't know if you've seen them. They're fabulous. This one is a Tiki Diablo from a couple years ago, and I love this with the little stopper there. So the barrel mug is an iconic feature, but there's just so many iconic features at the Mai Kai, which got its start back in 1956. And we're going to run through a little bit of the history for those who don't know. And for those who know, I'm sure you won't mind. It's just such a fascinating story that there's an old photo from 1956. While it was being built, the Mai Kai was built on pretty much a barren stretch of US Highway 1 in Fort Lauderdale at the time. The brothers, Bob and Jack Thornton, would come to Fort Lauderdale when they were in college, and they loved the area, just great during spring break, and you know, they had a good time here. But they're Chicago boys, so they were you know, hometown Chicago had a lot of tiki bars in the 1950s. They were Trader Vic aficionados. They used to go to Don the Beachcomber in Chicago. They went to college at Stanford. They frequented a lot of the tiki bars at the time. And when they got out of college, they said, well, you know what, let's start our own Polynesian palace. And they thought big. They thought really big. They got a loan from their parents, and they plopped it down, and they built the Mai Kai down here. And it was just an amazing structure at the time. The thatched roof was built by local Seminole Indians. They had, you know, some great designers working on it to build the, you know, this epic structure. That A-frame you see there is still part of the main part of the building. That's where the main showroom is. And the opening was touted in the local press as an exotic island to the city. The tourism industry was always huge in Fort Lauderdale, and it's kept the Mai Kai going these 64 years. The Thornton brothers were not dumb. They, you know, picked the right spot, the right city. And they also picked the right people to work at their bar. This guy on the right there, that's Mariano Licudine. We'll talk about him later. He's the mixologist. He's the man that brought all of Don Beach's cocktails to the Mai Kai. Now there's another view of the original building, which was designed by Charles F. McCarahan, decorated by Wayne Davidson. In those years, 350 doesn't sound like a lot, but it's huge. It was nearly 3.5 million if you adjust that to inflation. It was one of the most expensive restaurants built during that year. The Thornton brothers brought back artifacts from all over Polynesia to outfit the inside of the building. Oceanic Arts from California did a lot of the decor. The original showroom, you can see that there in the picture, that under that A-frame, that's a screen. It was open air. So people sitting inside for the show would be in an open air A-frame building. However, there were dining rooms to either side that were all glassed in with air conditioning. So it was sort of that 1950s mid-century modern meets primitive style that was really popular at the time. And it was a hit right out of the gate. I mean, people were flocking to the Mai Kai. There was a line around the building, and they had to add a bar onto the front of this. This is an old picture before the Molokai bar was even built. It just became so popular right away. One of the key elements when you think of the Mai Kai is the Polynesian Islander Review. It's the longest running South Sea stage show in the United States. It's been around since 1962, and it's still going strong. They actually had a fire dancer perform out in the parking lot Saturday, as part of the Tiki event. The performers for the show, you know, they're all South Pacific performers. They were brought over to found this show in 1962. The original band leader, Todi Taratua, came from Don the Beachcomber in Hawaii. He stayed at the Mai Kai for 30, 40 years. On the left there, that's Marie Thornton. Marie Thornton, she started as a dancer in 1962. She soon became the show producer and choreographer. And then she married the owner, Bob Thornton. So over the years, she's become, you know, the head honcho. When Bob passed away, she took over the restaurant and still owns it today with her children. She was at the event on Sunday. It was great to see her there. And she's still the creative force behind the show. She designs all the costumes with help from her staff. The dances and performances are all authentic South Seas performances. They're all created using materials from the South Pacific as well. Just an amazing show. And it's pretty much what has sustained the Mai Kai all these years. One of the other key aspects is because it was built in Fort Lauderdale on such a huge piece of property, and the Mai Kai was able to hold on to this property. It's a massive space. It's almost 3 acres all along the front of US 1, which is now built up all around it, unfortunately. You see this little oasis of tiki and big furniture stores right next to it. But once you get inside and get immersed inside the Mai Kai and the gardens, it's just an immersive experience. There's nothing like it. These giant tikis, like the one in the bottom left there, we used to call him Big Barney because Barney West, a famous tiki carver from the 1960s, carved that massive guy. What, Mike, was he like 15 feet?
No, it was 23 or 27 feet. I believe.
Yeah, you're right. This was the biggest tiki on property. The ones inside the garden are 15, I think.
Yeah.
But Barney West was just a legend as a carver. And I suppose these carvings were shipped across the country because he was in LA doing his carvings. They must have come by train across the country. There's only a couple left. Most of them have unfortunately been lost over time. But the ones that have kind of fallen, most of them have been replaced. There are some tiki carvers, modern tiki carvers that have done some great work. If you go inside the Mai Kai grounds, you'll see some brand new carvings that have been added over the past 5 or 10 years. Will Anders is a great local carver. He's done some massive tikis. I actually did a walking tour with Will and manager Kern Maddie. If you go to the Texas Tiki podcast, I did that a couple years ago, and it's still up there on the Texas Tiki podcast feed. You can listen to a walking tour we did of all the, actually the whole building. We started outside in front. We went through the Molokai and talking about all the massive grounds. It's just an amazing place.
Well, had to implant myself into this, being that yesterday was me and Chelsea's anniversary. And some of you on this call are in that photo there on the left. But that shows you the magnitude of how big Barney was. I believe it's 27 feet. And unfortunately, he's no longer with us. Hurricane Irma took him down a few years ago. But, you know, Tiki Diablo made mugs for the wedding. That's what you see up in the top right there, based off of Barney. And that's me and Jim 6 years ago yesterday.
And that mug, I made a drink for that mug, called it the Mai Kai Moai. And I don't know if they still serve it, but when they opened a couple of years ago, the Waikiki Tiki Room in Mexico City was serving my drink there. So it's a Mai Kai tribute drink.
And Jim and Susan, his wife, got married at the Mai Kai as well.
Yeah,
so sorry to go right over that.
No, I was just going to say, it's just a place where you go to celebrate. I mean, for birthdays, weddings, anniversaries, it's the place. And
let me bring up this picture I found of Chelsea, because a lot of you know who Chelsea is. That's 16 years ago on her 21st birthday, drinking a barrel in the Molokai bar. So a lot of great memories there.
Yeah, the Molokai bar is iconic. It was actually first added, like I said earlier, in 15, 8 or 9, when they needed another bar. The old bar inside only sat 19 people. So very quickly they realized these drinks are so popular. We need a full service bar. This version of the Mai Kai came in the early 70s, which was much bigger and much more expansive. It holds over 100 people. And they did an incredible job on the decor. This decor is all from the movie Mutiny on the Bounty. I wouldn't say all of it, the bar stools are not, but a lot of it was salvaged from the MGM Studios prop department. And they were going out of business, and the architects in charge of just redesigning the Mai Kai in the early 70s found out about this and got all this stuff. If you go through there, you'll see all these nautical props, and they're all from the movie. And they even got the set designer, or I think somebody who worked on the movie doing the rigging, to come in and do all the rigging at the Mai Kai. So all the rope work and all the nautical things that are positioned just so that it's authentic. It looks like you're on a South Seas. Well, I guess you're supposed to be in a South Seas saloon at the turn of the century. That's the Molokai bar decor. And Molokai bar is also famous for its happy hour. You saw that photo of Chelsea. I'm sure that was during happy hour.
Yeah, we only ever went back then when we had very little money. We were just young punk rock kids. Rum barrels were $12, and at happy hour from 5 to 7, Monday through Friday, it was buy one, get one. And you had to get the same drink for second one. So one rum barrel turned into 2, and then it would be like $5 or $6.50, and it's about 10 minutes before happy hour ends. So you order another one, which forces you into a fourth one. So next thing you know, you have 16 ounces of rum in your belly. They changed that. It's not buy one, get one anymore. It's just half off.
It's
so
just
half
forced
off into those second ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Molokai, to me, this is just the quintessential tiki bar. This is just a tiny sliver of what the Mai Kai is. Like the footprint of this is minuscule. But to me, this is like my happy place. I think every tiki bar should have elements that are in this.
And the Molokai was Martin Cate's inspiration for Smuggler's Cove as well. So we've had a lot of fun in the Molokai. But before we go too deep into it, we need to tip our hats to the guy who started it all. The Mai Kai would not be there, and we might not be sitting here talking if it weren't for this guy, Don the Beachcomber. He started the whole ball rolling back in 1933. According to the legend, I believe it. The day after Prohibition, he threw open his doors and pretty much changed the cocktail world with his rum rhapsodies and just the whole concept of a South Seas paradise in Hollywood, California.
Yeah. So Ernest Raymond Beaumont Gant. Many of us know him as Don Beach or Don the Beachcomber. Many call him the godfather of tiki because he created so many classic cocktails at that time. As a young man, he traveled, he sailed all over the world, fell in love with the South Pacific, went to Caribbean and learned how to make drinks there. And like Jim said, after repeal, opened up his bar on McAdam Street right off of Hollywood Boulevard. And, I think it only sat something like 24 people, but it was a hot spot. Like a lot of movie stars hung out there, and it was the happening spot. And, after a couple of years, he had to expand into a larger space right down the road and renamed it Don the Beachcomber. Yeah.
And he even changed his name. Yeah. So yeah, there's Don, with some schmoozing some of his guests, and he did so many things that are revolutionary. We don't have time to go into since this is not really a Don the Beachcomber presentation, but among them was having all the bartenders mixing drinks in the back bar out of sight of visitors. Don's out there, schmoozing and talking to everybody, and he had a bartender out there making old fashions or whatever. But all these rum rhapsodies were made in the back out of sight, so nobody knew what they were. They were just coming out in all their glory, like the Pearl Diver there, which nobody had ever tasted before. This mix of multiple rums and honey and butter. There's a honey butter mix in the Pearl Diver. Beach Bum Berry likes to say Don was farm to table 80 years before the concept even existed. And it was using fresh squeezed juices and all fresh fruits. And it was just something people had never seen before. And of course, everybody jumped right on it, started doing their own copies. And, next thing you know, there's Trader Vic's and there's Steve Crane and everybody else, but Don was the original. Now, when Don's reached a certain amount of success, they wanted to branch out and go somewhere else and become a franchise, or at least open more locations. Chicago was the first to open outside of Hollywood. So this is the original Chicago location, and as chance would have it, that's where Mariano Licudine moved to. He started working behind the bar at Don's in 1939 in Hollywood. 1940 rolls around, he jumps at the opportunity to go to Chicago. So he was one of many staffers who later came to the Mai Kai, which we'll talk about quickly here. But just to set the stage here, the Chicago connection was very crucial to what happened later and what became the Mai Kai. Do you want to start sipping some rum now, Mike? Do you think, now that we have this?
Yeah, we've been talking long enough. So one of Don's mottos was, what one rum can't do, three rums can. He would make these unique profiles by mixing rums from different regions, and the Kohala Bay blend that's in our rum barrels is a blend of a Demerara and a Jamaican rum. So if y'all want to taste your sample neat now, just give that one a whirl just to see. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Smith & Cross. It's a pure pot still Jamaican rum. It's got some nice funk and character. It's relatively young. And El Dorado, on the other hand, is a Demerara with 12 years of aging. So when you combine it, it makes a very unique profile.
Right. What Don figured out is that combinations of two rums or three rums or four rums just create totally new rums. And I don't think anyone had done that before, at least to this extent that he did it. He was schooled in the Caribbean on cocktails, the Planter's Punch, the daiquiri. Don learned all his tricks basically from these Caribbean cocktails, which weren't as complex. He just took that template from the Caribbean and really took it to the next level. And he took the rums to the next level too. That's his 1941 rum menu from Chicago. And there's just a ton of rums on there. This was in one of Beachbum Berry's books. I believe it's in Potions of the Caribbean. There's just a lot of Jamaican rums, a lot of Cuban rums which at the time were popular, obviously, the Demeraras, and then the Virgin Island and Puerto Rican rums, which were like hardcore mixing rums as well. And he had some Martinique rums on there too, which Mike and I discussed this. Those weren't rum agricoles in 1941. Those were likely, pre-agricole Martinique rums.
And none of those names are familiar. I don't know if any of those distilleries still exist, or any of those labels exist at this point.
But I did note here is that 20 of these rums on this 1941 list ended up at the Mai Kai. And you might ask, well, how do we know this? We'll show you in a few minutes. But everything from Don the Beachcomber was sort of like ported over to the Mai Kai, and there was like a method to the madness. It was pretty much taking a perfect template and just moving it south to Fort Lauderdale, and that included the cocktails. So Don's cocktail list, like we've been raving about, was iconic. There's his signature zombie, 3 dots and a dash, Demerara dry float. You just on and on. These are classics that Don created. Now 24 of these on these 2 pages alone were drinks that the Mai Kai has or had on their 1956 menu at least. And here's the 1956-57 Mai Kai menu. But what the Mai Kai did, which was similar to what a lot of other restaurants were doing, is they were just changing the names, using the similar flavor profile. So, you know, instead of the Jet Pilot, you had, instead of the Test Pilot, which was Don's drink, you had the Jet Pilot at the Mai Kai. They changed the Never Say Die into the Oh So Deadly. They changed the Colonial Grog into the Samoan Grog. The Missionary's Downfall became the Wahine Delight. The Navy Grog became Hillman's Grog. Just about every drink has a different name. And this was part of my research, just going down that rabbit hole and figuring out which drinks were which. Some were easy to figure out. The 151 Swizzle's the 151 Swizzle. We all know that. But it's fun to figure out, oh, which Don drink is that? And it took a while to figure out a lot of them. But
yeah, one that took me a while was the SOS. Which, if you look at that, you can see the 3 cherries and the pineapple. That's your 3 dots and a dash. The profile from the Mai Kai is very, very different, though.
Right. The drinks were all tweaked. They weren't. Don had actually had very good things to say about the Mai Kai. Don was not a fan of Trader Vic, as people might know, but he had kind words for the Mai Kai. He said they did it right. Everything they did was perfect. They changed all his recipes just a little here and there. Nothing was, you know, lifted completely. They did lift his employees, though. They took one of his managers, Bob Van Dorp, and that was the key right there. The manager came from Chicago. He brought the #2 chef and the #2 bartender, and he knew where to get all the ingredients. He knew where to get all the rums. He knew the secret ingredients, the coded recipes. So all the way down to this menu was pretty much done the same way Don did, with the same artwork. The same artist was doing these little renderings of the drinks. So when you were walking into the Mai Kai, it's sort of like a time capsule. You're tasting a little bit of Don the Beachcomber. So do you want me to show some of these menus?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I do have this is a 56 menu. It's the food menu. It's not the drink menu, but just some of these prices on here are amazing. But this is probably my most prized menu. And then that 56 menu we just saw, they did a lot of reprints of it. This is a reprint. It's not the original, but it's just such an iconic menu. This one's a little bit later. This, I think, where's this from? Oh, this is a 1990s. Prices are a little higher in the 90s. But, and then I have a couple from the modern day Mai Kai, a little bit more grand presentation. They ditched the little line drawings and went with photos of all the drinks, which some people were sad to see go, but I think it sells more drinks if you can see what the drink looks like rather than a little piece of artwork from the 1950s. And I think this might be the very latest one, I think, because it has the $17 barrel in it. You can usually figure out the which menu is which just based on the prices. You have one, don't you, Mike? Or no?
Yeah, let me show mine. This is, actually I haven't put a date on it yet, but the drink jumped from $2 to $2.50 on the barrel. So also one thing I noticed was where it has the Derby Daiquiri here. Been meaning to look up when exactly that hit the menu, but on the original 56 menu, which I have on the wall and can't show you, it was a Cuban daiquiri. So the Derby Daiquiri replaced the Cuban daiquiri.
Right.
So I'm willing to bet this was probably post 1960 or right around 60 when
okay,
we cut off sanctions with Cuba.
I'll have to compare it to, I have an image of a 59 menu, and we could probably compare that. You're probably right. The Derby's on an upcoming slide, the date of it. I think it's 59. But the history of the Mai Kai is just such a fascinating thing that we could spend a whole hour diving into. But I'm going to highly recommend, for further reading, if anybody wants to really go down the rabbit hole with the Mai Kai, this is the book about the Mai Kai. Tim Swanky Glazner wrote it. Mai Kai: History and Mystery of the Iconic Tiki Restaurant. You can find out more about that book at maikaihistory.com. I believe he'll even he'll sign a copy for you and ship it right to you. You can probably get it on Amazon as well. But Swanky's book is a great resource. The other for cocktails, Sip and Safari. This is the 10th anniversary edition. There's a whole chapter. The last chapter is all Mai Kai. It's all cocktails. So that pretty much will cover you as far as the Mai Kai history. Beachbumberry.com is the best place to find that book as well. Back to the show. Oh, that menu, Mike, I looked it up. 32 of those drinks from 56 are still on the menu today. Now, I find that kind of not amusing, but I find it amusing that craft cocktail bars and new tiki bars find it necessary to like change their menu every 6 months and swap out drinks every season. The Mai Kai's had 32 of the same drinks for 64 years. So think about that. Mariano Licudine, there he is. He worked for Don, as I said earlier, and there he is in the center right of that photo. That's the pineapple bar, the surfboard bar with the pineapple bar stools. And that was before the Molokai was even built. He came from the Philippines, like a lot of Don's bartenders. He was born in 1907. Like I said, he came to Hollywood. He actually worked as a private chauffeur and personal mixologist for Laurel and Hardy before he joined Don the Beachcomber. That's interesting part of his life story. Then he went to Chicago, then came to the Mai Kai, and the rest is history. 1956, the Thornton brothers there, that's Bob on the left, they brought him in, and they had confidence that he could revolutionize their tiki bar menu, and he did, with a little bit of help from the Thorntons. The Thorntons were like the drinkers. Mariano was not a big drinker, so he would make the drinks, run it by them, and they'd say tweak this, tweak that, and that's how they arrived at these classic drinks. Uh, 1960s, there you see the Derby Daiquiri, like Mike mentioned earlier. 1958 was the birth date of the Derby Daiquiri. I figured out he made this drink for the Gulfstream Derby. The Gulfstream Derby was a big race in Fort Lauderdale. It was sort of like a competitor to the Kentucky Derby, but not really. Mariano became an ambassador for rums in Puerto Rico. He was so renowned that they would send him to Puerto Rico and to other countries in the Caribbean to make tropical drinks, to show people in the Caribbean how to make Caribbean drinks.
I just got to comment on that coaster, how cool that is, because that's a stemmed glass that has a round bottom that sits within that coaster. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, that's Swanky's photo. I'm sure he collects all that, and that's the Derby Daiquiri glass too, which is very rare. There's a little jockey on the stem there.
I've got one. I'll show it in a minute.
It's basically just a frozen daiquiri with orange juice, but it was a huge drink. It became, before the rum barrel, it was the iconic drink of the Mai Kai. Now shifting ahead, Mariano stayed at the Mai Kai for many, many years. He retired in 1979 after 23 years. That's him behind the bar with some of his men, and it's just an amazing display there. People ask me sometimes, what would you want to go back in time? Would you go to the Mai Kai in 1956 and 1958? Or I think I'd like to go in the late 70s when Mariano was like at the height of his game. I think the drinks were probably better than ever during this time period. There's a whole bunch of drinks there, but they all look the same today. That's what's amazing. You see the one in the front with the two mugs, that's the Shrunken Skull and the Maruamu. And right next to it in the Ice Cove, that's the Special Reserve Daiquiri. All the way to the left, there's the Deep Sea Diver, which is Mariano's take on the Pearl Diver. It's in that same iconic glass. You see a rum barrel up there on the right. And they still all use it. They use all the glasses today. Actually, there's some interesting story behind some of the glasses. The Pearl Diver glass kind of disappeared at some point, and Beach Bum Berry brought it back. And now the Mai Kai uses the Beach Bum Berry version of the glass, which was inspired by the Mai Kai, who were inspired by Don the Beachcomber.
I just want to point out in this ad on the left, this guy giggling really hard on the left. Those are not shaker tins. Mai Kai does not shake drinks. No, those are mixing tins that he's putting together like he's shaking a drink.
They were posing. Yeah, it was a pose picture for a magazine. But yeah, they don't. As we'll see later, they don't really shake. But I guess they thought it made a good, amusing photo. This is what they really do, and this is a collage I put together. That's Don Beach in the 1930s. You can't really see it too clearly, but there are spindle blenders there and on the right-hand side of that photo. And Don's mixing up drinks in his back bar. In the middle, you can see Mariano similarly mixing up drinks. He's got some pineapples there. That's probably the Peanut Passion. And on the right-hand side is a photo I took like 2 years ago of a current bartender in the Mai Kai mixing up drinks in almost the exact same spot where Mariano stood. And you can see the spindle blender right there to his right. So it's really, nothing has changed, and they're following these rigid standards that Don set many, many years ago, which I think is amazing. The other thing the Mai Kai did, they followed Don, is it's all behind closed doors. This bar, all these photos of these bars we see, like this one, it's way in the back. It's behind the kitchen. Nobody, even if you tried, you couldn't find the bar. They service the showroom. 200, 300, 400 people are sitting in the Mai Kai restaurant, dining rooms, ordering drinks. And these bartenders have to be fast. They have to knock out these complicated drinks. So they need a service bar that's huge and that can really be fast. And that's the whole point of the back service bar. And there you see Mariano with the spindle blenders. And he's actually pointing at a bottle of Dagger, which we're going to be a subject of our conversation real soon. Just wanted to make a few more points about this, the whole concept of making the drinks behind closed doors. It was, part of it's the secret formulas. They don't want drinks to be stolen and used at other bars and restaurants. And believe it or not, the Mai Kai still does that today. Bartenders who work there don't have a clue what's in some of these bottles that just say number 7 or number 4. They use these spindle blenders like we talked about, and they just knock out these drinks. And when they built the Molokai, they did the same thing. They built the Molokai bar in the front with a back of house bar there as well. However, the servers in the Molokai are sarong-clad serving girls, which are another iconic element that we somehow neglected to mention when we were talking about the Molokai. That's one of the selling points of the bar. So again, the Mai Kai took Don's traditions and pretty much took them to the next level.
Another thing I'm not sure if we touched on, but the way that Mariano was in the advertisements for the bar,
yes,
it's very rare for a restaurant to talk about the staff and flaunt the staff for their abilities the way the Mai Kai did.
Right. They promoted him front and center, which was unusual for tiki bartenders of the day, which as Beach Bum Berry revealed later, they were pretty much unsung heroes. Nobody knew who they were until Ray Buin opened the Tiki Tea. Nobody really knew who he was. And a lot of these guys were working anonymously, but the Mai Kai made it a point to make Mariano, front and center. And this is that same bar. This is the back of house, the service bar in 2000. I took this photo in 2011. Beach Bum Berry wrote this in 2009. I'll just let you read it. It just speaks for itself, and it's some of the bum's best prose. It was on his blog. He was given this exclusive tour back there to see this bar, and he came away blown away for multiple reasons, one of which was all these old rums that are sitting up there on the top shelf. It's really a top shelf, and it's full of these old bottles that have been sitting there since those photos we just saw of Mariano putting those bottles up there on the shelf. they amazingly just leave them and let them sit up there, and we'll see a few of them here shortly. But it's an amazing time capsule, and Jeff got to taste some of them, which I've tasted a few, but after Jeff and some other people got through with them, there wasn't a whole lot left. But he wrote about this on his blog at the time. It was amazing. So the word got out, you know, this is the place to come to look at all these old rums. And over the years, I got my first tour in 2011, but every time there's a VIP in town, I'd hear about it. I'd know, Joy Spence is here. She's gonna want to get a tour of the back bar. So I've been there several times to document these great adventures, just to see these guys. Alexander Gabriel went right for that Barbados rum. This was when he was about to buy that distillery in Barbados. So it was no surprise. I took it to the next level in 2019 at the Hukilau. We did a presentation called The Rums of the Mai Kai. And I brought in Stephen Remsburg, the owner of the world's largest private rum collection. He came down. There he is in the bottom left and the upper middle there. He pointed to a few rums. Of course, when Stephen Remsburg points at a rum, you know, he gets a little taste. So I got to taste a few of the old rums with Stephen. And then we did that little presentation there in the bottom. I got up on a ladder and took pictures of every bottle up there. So I still have that all documented. Then the very next day, the cocktail wonk, Matt Petrick up there came in, and we did another presentation with Matt, and it was just a hell of a lot of fun to really geek out on all these old rums. Which leads us into, well, we'll talk about a few of these old rums here first. This was the presentation I did with Matt. You could actually hear an audio of it. There on the left, it's on the Inside the Desert Oasis Room podcast. Adrian was there and he recorded it. So it's Matt and I talking about all the old rums at the Mai Kai and a lot of the history that we just went over, but in a lot more geeky rum detail. These are a few of the pictures of the old bottles up there. Up in the upper right, that's a bunch of old Bacardi bottles from Cuba, pre-Castro. In the top left picture, I don't know if you can see it, the tall, skinny one, it says Sloppy Joe's rum on it. That's a bottle of 40-year-old rum that was sold at Sloppy Joe's in Havana, bottled in 1950. And I have no idea how it got up on the top shelf of the Mai Kai. It was probably a popular sipping rum of the time, but just think about it. That rum was laid down in the cask in 1910. And it's still there. There's some other ones in the other picture down there that are significant as well. It was just, you know, amazing to see all these old bottles. And one of the amazing old bottles in the back, well, part of our presentation was revealing this. This was the big reveal. Tim Swanky Glazner gave me this that he found in Bob Van Dorp's archives. This is the 1956-57 Mai Kai rum purchasing list. That's pretty much a document that shows every rum that the Mai Kai purchased month by month from the time they opened through the next year. So I did my due diligence and added it all up, and you know, there's a lot of rums there. There's at the very top, there's a dark Jamaican rum called Dagger that we're going to talk about very, very soon. You can see the numbers there. Like Don the Beachcomber, the Mai Kai relied heavily on their Puerto Rican rums, the Jamaican rums, the Guyana rums. Dagger was that dark Jamaican that they used in a lot of the drinks. It was, yeah, there's a better view of it. Down on the bottom right, 14,800 bottles. That's not to say they were all sold or drank, but you got to figure if they had that many bottles in the house, they didn't last that long. But some of them are still up on that shelf. This is how I determine a lot of those old bottles. You know, you see a few on there that we just saw in a previous photo. I think this document was done for the rums of Puerto Rico because figured out at the bottom, all those numbers are the Puerto Rican rums. They added up. It was probably part of their deal with Rums of Puerto Rico to document how many Puerto Rican rums they were using. It was 5,900 bottles of Puerto Rican rum. The reason Puerto Rican rum is so prevalent, and you see Boca Chica white and Boca Chica gold. It's in almost every drink. Basically, when you're making a drink at a tiki bar or the Mai Kai, every drink either has a white or a gold Spanish style rum as the base, not the only rum like the Derby Daiquiri. And then you have your Demerara 86 and 151 there clocking in at number 3 and number 4. But if you look at the numbers on the far right, yeah, those are the dominant rums that they use in a lot of the drinks. I was really surprised how many bottles of Dagger they sold.
Something interesting to point out, with them putting the white or gold Puerto Rican style rum in most of the cocktails, I had several people today, which I probably should have explained this in the email. People were like, "What white rum should I put in the barrel?"
Right.
A lot of times it's just to add proof to the drink.
It doesn't really matter.
Flavor. So,
Yeah.
so you don't want to put a premium white in your cocktail necessarily, unless it's the featured rum. But if you're pairing it with a Jamaican or another rum, you just want it to be in there to up the proof and make your drink stronger.
Yeah, you kind of have to think about it as like an orchestra. Where the rums, you have some rums that are just there, to play rhythm guitar or something, to be supporting cast. Every rum can't be the star of the drink. And I moved forward and did this research and created this document for my class called How to Mix Like the Mai Kai at Kohala 2018. And this kind of shows you those same rum styles. So I wasn't surprised after I did this to see, there's Demerara rums, there's the Jamaican rums, and there's the Spanish style rums that are in almost every drink. These are the current drinks, and these are my guesstimates. I'm not privy to the recipes, so I'm not really sure for sure, but obviously those rums the point is these rums from 1956 are still today used at the Mai Kai. Different brand names, different bottles, but the same styles of rum, same recipes, same drinks. And one of the big drinks and big rums that we're talking about today is the dark Jamaican and the rum barrel. And the key to that whole thing is this dark Jamaican rum. And that's what we really want to talk about. The rum you're sipping is sort of a tribute to this rum. We can't really taste the original on the left there, Dagger, because it's been long gone. These were all J. Ray and Nephew rums. As you can see, they're very dark and rich. They had a higher ABV than most other Jamaican rums. The Dagger Punch, the original, was a legendary rum that Don Beach used in all his cocktails. So that's a direct link to Don Beach. Let's see here. The second rum you see there is Appleton Punch that came after Dagger, and then inexplicably Dagger came back in a different formulation, and then finally after Dagger disappeared, then came Kohala Bay, which is the subject of our talk today. But this is the lineage. Kohala Bay's great grandfather is Dagger Punch. These are all the drinks on the menu that contain Kohala Bay or used to contain Dagger. They're pretty much a lot of the strong, iconic drinks. There's a few others, and there's more than I even was able to identify. I found out later that there's Dagger or Kohala Bay and something else. So it's still, like I said, it's still an ongoing process I'm trying to figure out. But these are the ones that you just know. And I was told by the manager that these drinks are the ones.
So we're going to kind of go through the evolution of starting with the Dagger Punch up until Kohala Bay here, kind of go through the stats of them. So all of them were products of Ray and Nephew. The thing to know about Wray and Nephew, they were not a distillery. Wray and Nephew was historically a a bottler, a blender. They didn't, they owned distilleries, and they would take pieces from, they owned Appleton. At one point, they owned Long Pond and I think Moni Musk. And so yeah, they would take components from the different distilleries they owned to make their products. So Dagger originally had an 8-year age statement. So that would be the minimum amount of aging within each bottle. And it was bottled at 97 proof. We have evidence through, Don the Beachcomber that this brand existed at least from 1930s. I'm not sure if it was earlier than that. And we believe it was in production through about the 80s or so. So I was talking with Matt Petrick on this because I know that Jamaica was, late to adapt to the column still, the technology of that. So most of the rums made in Jamaica up through the, mid 20th century would be pure pot still, 100% pot still. Matt told me that he thinks it might have been even the 60s before distilleries in Jamaica were adapting to column still. So we could probably, gander that at least in the early days of the Mai Kai, being that it's an 8-year age rum, it was mostly, if not all, pot still. That's not to say that it was a funk bomb. That's not to say that it's a Hamden or a Smith and Cross or something like that. There are light marks of pot still, as we've learned in other talks we've done. So the different marks are made up of the recipe, the fermentation times, and whatnot. So just because it potentially was a pure pot still doesn't mean it was super funky either. These were, the Dagger Punch was marketed as a mixer for cocktails. And, just like Appleton today is the flagship brand of Wray and Nephew, where, you have your signature, your reserve, your 12-year rare cask. Dagger had a lineup here. They had the 1 dagger, the 2 dagger, and the 3 dagger. Each had a different age statement to them. They were all 97 proof. And then you have the Dagger Punch, which was their premier mixing rum. So this was, highly promoted. It was their most popular brand. And here's some of the other promotional stuff they did. I wish I knew the date on these Cloak and Dagger glasses, but for $1 you can get a set of 8 of these amazing glasses. And on the right here, this was an ad from about 1960. It's a postcard. It's an oversized postcard that is also a record that you can play. And so I've actually got one of these, and we'll show a close-up in a couple minutes. But one thing to point out on the Appleton Estate Special on the bottom, you can see the imagery on the label has the dagger. So eventually, the dagger, the 1, 2, and 3 dagger and the Dagger Punch all went away and was replaced with Appleton, and they built up their own line. Appleton, even though they've been around since like 1749 or something like that, they were just a distillery. They didn't actually bottle anything until the 40s. And even then, it was promoted as a light sipping rum or mixing rum. They wanted to be in competition with Scotch. So you can see the evolution happening, where the dagger ended up on the Appleton bottle, and we'll show more of that in a minute. But I'm going to play you a sound clip from this record here. It's pretty fun. I'll play about a minute of it.
Welcome to Jamaica, land of Dagger Punch and 3 Dagger, land of Appleton Estate Special, the world's best-known light rum. J. Wray and Nephew Limited, who produce in Jamaica, Jamaica's most popular refreshment, express the hope that your stay here be one on which, forever after, you look back with the happiest memories. And they remind you that when you leave, you may take with you, to help bridge that end-of-vacation period, 5 bottles of Wray and Nephew rum, duty-free.
During your stay, make sure you try Jamaica's most popular rum, Appleton Estate Special, either on the rocks or with your favorite mixer.
To Jamaica where the rum come from, the rum come from, the rum come from. To Jamaica away the rum come from, and you will have some fun. The leather and the baby may be cold as ice, cold as ice. You better think twice.
I just love that.
So yeah, I don't know if you know the age of you people, but I remember as a kid, like boxes of cereal would have like a cutout cardboard record on the back that you could play. So that's kind of what this thing is. It's really fun, and it's a postcard on the back, which is postmarked 1961. So they can give us some indication of when this was manufactured and when you know, Dagger was still around and Appleton was becoming their kind of flagship. So yeah, that's fun. Jim, I think you have a bottle of Appleton you wanted to show people.
Yeah. Before you go on the next screen, I just wanted to tie a bow on Dagger. It's sort. I think it was like the end of an era too. It's sort of like before that was that 97 proof Dagger. I'm assuming based on that record they sold a lot of that rum in England, and they probably sold a lot of that rum to bars in the United States as well. And it's sort of like that's the holy grail, that original Appleton 97 proof, if you could ever find a bottle of it.
However, a couple other. Go ahead.
I do have a bottle to show
Okay.
that I was lucky to come across. This is the Appleton Punch that came right after Dagger, and it doesn't have the Dagger on the label like we saw, but it is 97 proof. So Stephen Remsburg, as part of our presentation at the Hoopy Lab, brought this. It was a lot fuller at that point. We put a big dent in it. Oh, look at that! I poured myself a little sip, so I'm gonna have a little bit of it.
We're all jealous, Jim.
This is an amazing rum. If Dagger's anything like the Appleton Punch, I believe, you know, at 97 proof and from Appleton, it's got to be very, very, very similar to the Dagger. So I'd like to call this version of Appleton Punch the missing link. It's sort of like the link between the old Dagger and the new Appleton, and then later Kohala Bay. Even as old as this rum is, it's probably a bottle from, Stephen told me it was a bottle from the 1970s. And I don't disbelieve him, but this just blows away any new bottle of rum that I could get off the shelf. You know, it's just an amazing rum. There's a lot of caramel, there's a lot of funk, there's a lot of dark molasses. It's in a drink. That's where it really stars. I mean, just that the fact that I can sip it and enjoy it is amazing on its own. But when you put this in a rum barrel like we did at the Hookula a couple of years ago, that's the best rum barrel I ever had. So, which, you know, you kind of think back and, oh, that's why these drinks were so popular, because they had these great rums.
Yeah, so even though there is a clear lineage of Dagger to Appleton, back to Dagger and to Kohala Bay, there was definitely changes going on where proof eventually dropped and the components that made it up changed. But for the most part, you know, the average consumer would not realize the change within the cocktails.
Right. You have that next slide that shows that. That's the bottle on the left is probably the original Appleton Punch. And then the bottle on the right is probably the final Appleton Punch where they lowered the ABV. The one I have is somewhere in the middle. What we're confused about, we don't really know yet, is, you know, why this happened and, you know, what happened to Dagger. And you never know with some of these, you know, rum companies and promotional, they might have their reasons for rebranding and selling. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was, you know, for marketing purposes or who knows what, but I believe the rum in the bottle was very similar.
So yeah, one thing of note here is going from Dagger Punch to Appleton Punch, it lost the age statement.
Right.
You know, it was minimum 8 years. It no longer carries that.
And the column still came into play at some point too, right?
Right. So I'm wondering if they had some new distillate off of this column, so they started cutting, you know, the 8-year rum with some of that, but they couldn't call it 8-year rum anymore. And that could also play into the proof lowering from 97 to 86.
Right.
Yeah.
So continuing to trace the evolution, what happened is Appleton Punch at some point, which we'll discuss here, well, went away and Dagger came back. We call this the new Dagger. In the 1990s, there was a new version of Dagger, and it's 87.6 proof. The new Dagger was similar to the old Dagger, and probably similar to Appleton Punch. There was just, you know, tweaks as it went. It was an evolution. I've tasted this version of Dagger. It's heavy on the molasses. It's a lot like the Appleton Punch. It's just you know, 20, you know, 10 less in the proof department. It's not going to be as strong and punchy. It's still a great rum, and Kohala Bay, you know, continues that transition. I don't think Kohala Bay is as heavy on the molasses as Dagger is. But the main thing is, again, it's a marketing and promotional thing. They started these 1.75 liter plastic jugs. So I don't know when that became a thing. Sometime in the 1990s. Yeah, there's the original Dagger bottle that I saw on the shelf at the Mai Kai, next to an old Lemon Heart and next to an old Bacardi. And after my presentation, I was talking to the owner. That's Dave Levy, the owner of the Mai Kai, and you know, he said, "Oh, great presentation. Have you had the Dagger?" And I said, "What? No, I haven't had the Dagger." And he pulls out this bottle and starts pouring me shots of the 1990s Dagger, and I'll forever be grateful to Dave for that. You know, it was just a wonderful, rich, molassesy taste that, you know, it's Kohala Bay is not quite the same. You know, it's like, I just, you know, wish they never got rid of Dagger. Like, that was the ultimate, I think, in dark Jamaican mixing rums. So here's the official timeline as closely as I can put it. We started with Dagger Punch. We moved in the early 80s to Appleton Punch. I know this because the manager, Kern, worked in the bar in the 80s, and he said, "Oh yeah, we were pouring Appleton Punch in the 80s." Then sometime in the 90s, new Dagger came back in those big plastic bottles. And at some point in the late 90s, it transitioned into Kohala Bay. But people like to say, "Oh, Kohala Bay is the same as Dagger." It's not really. There was something different about Kohala Bay, and we'll get into that. It's still a great rum. And, you know, it's probably better than most mixing rums on the market today. And Martin Cate felt so strongly about it. You'll notice it's in his book as one of his recommended rums, even though it was so rare and so hard to find. I remember Martin came into the Molokai one night, and after I had discovered Kohala Bay and revealed all this information, and he said, "I got to taste it." So we got shots, and, you know, they poured us some hefty glasses of Kohala Bay and took a swig, and I'll never forget the look on Martin's face. It's that face, that squinty face, like, this isn't that good. But he, you know, quickly realized this is a mixing rum. This is not to be sipped. It's a great mixer.
Yeah, that's an important thing to distinguish here, that this was not a very refined one you want to, you know, sit down with a tall glass of. I mean, this was a workhorse mixer. This is what made cocktails great.
Yeah, as the years went on, I think in this evolution, that's what happened. Is it became such an iconic mixer that they didn't bother with the aging anymore. They didn't bother, you know, but they kept it a great mixing rum. You know, it still holds up. And unfortunately, when Kohala Bay disappeared, you see there in the timeline, Appleton Signature was the fallback, and it just didn't work. So a couple of years later, 2019, the Mai Kai has their own secret multi-rum blend, We're talking about blending rums. The Mai Kai's doing that now, and they're coming up with something just as good or very close to Kohala Bay, which is very, very encouraging. And then my little note there at the bottom, you know, there's ongoing talks. It's very difficult to source a new rum and to have it bottled, but the Mai Kai's been in talks for years with either a distillery or an importer or a blender or somebody that can come up with their own Kohala Bay blend. So I wouldn't give up hope. There could be something coming, but in the meantime, we're having fun making these blends on our own. Yeah, there's the tombstone to Kohala Bay. I first saw it in the back bar in 2011. Kern, the manager, said, "Hey, yeah, this is the rum we use." You know, he was not shy about showing it to me. Unfortunately, 5 years later, up there in the upper right, that's the last I saw of Kohala Bay at the Mai Kai. By 2017, they had the Appleton in its place, and you know, it just it didn't have that same. It had even though it's a J. Ray and nephew rum, Appleton Signature's a fine rum. It just didn't serve the purpose that Kohala Bay did. So the barrel suffered and some other drinks suffered. So they have recovered. What happened though in the tiki world and the rum world is Kohala Bay was always a white whale. Nobody could find it, even when it was available. It was only available at the Mai Kai. You couldn't just walk into any liquor store. I actually contacted the distributor when I first heard about it, you know, and I said, "Well, where can I get this rum?" And he said, "Oh, let me find out." It's only in Florida, and there's only 3 people that get this rum. And well, 3. Can you? Oh, we'll send you the spreadsheet. I still have it. It's a spreadsheet from the importer. The Mai Kai was #1, obviously. There was a hotel on South Beach that was doing something with Kohala Bay, who knows what. And then there was a liquor store in South Miami, and that's what lit the light bulb in my head went off, and I hightailed it down to this liquor store in South Miami, and I found Kohala Bay on the shelf, and that's when the frenzy started. I bought a case, I posted it on Tiki Central. Everyone knew about it. People were buying Kohala Bay by the case from this. It was a strip club. It was a strip club with a liquor store attached to it. And it was amazing because I knew the club as a rock club from the 1980s, and my wife's band played there. And I took her with me when we were going down there to find this rum. She said, "Are you kidding me? This used to be the rock club." She waited in the car as I went in, but it was just an attached liquor store. So when I went in there, I saw, "Oh, that's Kohala Bay. The Mai Kai uses that." The guy just shrugged. And I said, "Can I get a case?" And he sold me a case. But it later kind of took off, and there were other Florida liquor stores started picking up on it. Mike, is that when you picked up on it? I forget who stocked it that you got it.
It was the place in Vero Beach. It was like Roy's or Ray's or something like that.
Yeah, Roy's stocked it, and I guess the distributor figured out they could sell some more of it.
Yeah, I went out of my way. I was driving because Chelsea's her family's in Jacksonville, and I was living in Fort Lauderdale. So we were driving up there, and we drove like 45 minutes out of our way just to go to this liquor store that had Kohala Bay. So I picked up a couple handles. I think it was like $25 for
it was cheap.
For a 1.75 liter.
Yeah.
And I wish I would have bought more. Yeah, I went home with 2.
You see Karuba there next to it, which is prophetic because before we even knew what Kohala Bay was, Karuba was our go-to rum. And I used Karuba in a lot of the Mai Kai cocktails, and I was convinced, oh, the Mai Kai uses Karuba. It's great. It tastes great. But as we later found out, Karuba is not Kohala Bay. It's 80 proof. It's not quite as punchy. It doesn't have the same characteristics, but it's similar. So what happened is across the country and the rest of the universe, nobody could get Kohala Bay. So they were asking me, well, what do we do? And a lot of people were trying to come up with different, blends to mimic Kohala Bay. And that's what we're tasting now. That was one of the first blends. It was kind of a product of Tiki Central, which is where we all gathered and geeked out on Tiki and rum. And it got to the point where Kohala Bay became such a mystery rum that Punch wrote a story about it. I was quoted in there about this, people going out of their way to duplicate the flavor of Kohala Bay. Smith and Cross El Dorado 12 became the one, and I like it. I still like this blend. It's very good. We don't really know who really came up with it though. It kind of just was kind of grassroots, and it just bubbled up.
Yeah, it's very sad that Tiki Central's been down for a year now. I mean,
Yeah,
it seems like a year. I don't know how many of you were on Tiki Central, but that was the only type of, I mean, I don't know if you want to call it even social media. I mean, just like anything, it was the only thing on the internet that I engaged in, and I did it daily. And people, there'd be topics like how to replace Kohala Bay, and everybody was throwing their blends out there, and it was a lot of people that never had even tried Kohala Bay. So they're just coming up with stuff,
right,
just trying to mimic something they never actually even experienced.
Before we get into that, let me show my bottles up close. So can you put me on camera? Yeah, here we go. Yeah, here's that handle we were talking about. This is an unopened Kohala Bay, one of two I have left. Some people are sitting on cases, I understand, but I'm unfortunate enough to only have a couple of these bottles. But what I do have, which I don't know if anyone else has, is a 750 milliliter glass bottle, which is very rare. I picked this up at Roy's. And this is actually what I'm sipping on now.
My bottle, sadly, so I'll tell my story really quick, even though we're running really long and we have a long way to go. So when I got to about this level in my Kohala Bay on my second bottle, I thought I got to stop drinking this until I find more. And Sunset Corners, which was a store in Miami, ships. So I got together with a couple people, I think probably Trey and maybe other people in this group, and I was like, hey, let's go in on a case. Like, I want 2 for me, and I'll find 4 others and order a case. And put in the order, it went through. The next day I get an email, we don't ship to Texas. We canceled the order. And about a week later, word started getting out that Kohala Bay has been discontinued. Right. Whatever's out in the world is all there is left. And yeah, I never got another bottle. Yeah,
Roy's actually had it for a while. I guess Roy's was sitting on a big supply, and the Mai Kai actually had cases and cases of it. I guess they told their distributor, we need everything you got. So it didn't run out immediately at the Mai Kai, but we knew the handwriting was on the wall, or we weren't really sure. But backtracking a little bit to when Kohala Bay was still available and on the market, and nobody could really get their hands on it. You were out in Texas, and even people, in other parts of the country who couldn't get it. I posted this Smith and Cross El Dorado blend on Tiki Central and on my blog, and there were a couple other suggestions. Number 2 was Smith and Cross, Myers, and Gosling's 151. This shows you how long ago, 5 years ago, this is all we could come up with. Number 3 was Karuba, but we weren't trying that hard. Anyway, I was on Tiki Central one day and I saw this guy named Mike Hooker who said, well, why don't you try Smith and Cross and Appleton Reserve? So I did, and all of a sudden that became the number 2. So,
funny story. I have no recollection of that. when I was shown the slide, I was like, I never even tried that. I just threw that idea out.
Right. So yeah, but what happened is Tiki Central was at its peak. So there were so many people on there, it just opened the floodgates. And there were dozens of suggestions overnight. Let's see. I call it the Kohala Bay substitute renaissance. There was OFTD and Hamilton and all these rums coming out, and people were messaging me every day, hey, have you tried mixing Hamilton with Appleton, with Lemonheart, with OFTD? It was just, incredible amount of suggestions. So I had to weed it all down. And I went through this process, as you can see, put my liver on the line and tried all these different combinations. And after all this time and effort and all these different combinations, what should emerge as the number one is the same old Smith & Cross Eldorado 12. So I really did a blind tasting. I wasn't cheating. I didn't know which was which. And the one I liked the best, or I thought was more like Kohala Bay, was the one we're tasting still. I hope you still have some with you. Smith & Cross Eldorado 12. It is a good blend, but there are a lot of others percolating up there. As you can see, people were suggesting all kinds of different combinations. And if you go on my blog, go back to that one, the last one. The suggestions here are still on the blog. If you want to see all these different suggestions, they're all good. Some people, depending on where you live, you can't get Karuba, you can't get Smith & Cross, whatever. But I mean, what happened is, I settled on this as the definitive list. Unfortunately, like any definitive list, it changes. So by 2019, there were more new rums coming out. Jamaican rums were just blowing up at the time. So Plantation, Zamaka, of course, is a great rum. So I decided, okay, we need to go back to the drawing board, try some new blends. When I first heard about it, I thought, wait a minute, maybe that rum by itself would be Kohala Bay. It wasn't, unfortunately. We still haven't found one rum by itself that can replace Kohala Bay, but I threw some new ones into the mix there. You see Karuba and Zamaka equal parts is very good. That's an easy one to make. 2 parts Zamaka, 1 part Hamilton Black is a good one. So this evolution of creating new blends just continued. The one on the left there, I don't know if anyone knows Red Heart. That's a rare one. Someone brought me back a couple of bottles. It's a 86 proof blend of rums from Jamaica, Barbados, Guyana, and Trinidad, all in one bottle. That's a Navy rum, if you ask me. It doesn't say that on the bottle, but it's bottled in South Africa, but it's a really outstanding rum. So I put this up on the big screen at the Hukilau and, thought we're done with it. We're going to move on. We've got enough of these blends. Smith & Cross Eldorado 12 is the definitive. Meanwhile, the Mai Kai is still there, and the Mai Kai is dealing with a lot of things, least of which was, their dark Jamaican rum. But what they did do before the pandemic, they created their own blend, like I mentioned earlier. They put 3 rums together, and they made a blend. And I'm not going to reveal it. I have tasted it. I have some here. It's very similar to one of those blends we just saw on the screen. It's a blend that Mai Kai makes, and it's very, very close to Kohala Bay. And I'm just thrilled that the Mai Kai was able to do this, and they still use it. In these big gallon barrels that you can get, they're, for the most part, trying to use this blend as much as they can when they can batch it up. And it's kind of returned all those great drinks back to their old glory. Mike, you haven't been here in the past 2 years to try it, have you?
I haven't been to the Mai Kai since when I went to Cuba.
I saw you there
5 years ago, yeah. And that's when they had just introduced the number 7 or whatever, the secret syrup.
Yeah.
And so that was going into a lot of drinks at the time.
Yeah, so you missed the whole downfall of Kohala Bay, and the resurgence with the new blend is very, very good. And if nothing else happens and we're stuck with this for the rest of eternity, it's fine, I think.
Well, that's promising.
So,
as long as we have a Mai Kai.
So meanwhile, the pandemic came out of nowhere, or it came. Some people knew it was coming. Anyway, it came last year, and the Mai Kai has been dealing with that. They did reopen a couple months after the shutdowns, and that's when these gallons came along, and that's what kind of inspired me to do all these new revisions of the recipes. And I never thought it would lead me down the rabbit hole back to Kohala Bay, but we'll see what's coming here on the next screen. The Mai Kai reopened. They they introduced a new sipping rum menu. I'm just throwing this in there for people interested in rum. The Mai Kai has their own house blend that the real McCoy did a Mai Kai blend. It was Bailey Pryor and Richard Seal collaborated on this 92 proof 12-year-old real McCoy, and you can get this at the Mai Kai. It's an excellent rum. They sell it by the bottle. They sell it by the glass. It's a little more pot still than the regular 12-year-old real McCoy, which fits in with the Mai Kai. I've done a lot of experimenting with it. It works great in a shark bite and some classic Mai Kai cocktails. Meanwhile, I was getting my gallons to go, as you can see there, and I recorded a podcast for the Desert Oasis Room that you could probably listen to in their feed, where I recorded it live driving to the Mai Kai to pick up a couple gallons. Then things took a turn for the worse. The Mai Kai opened, we were back in business, but in late October, we had these crazy storms and the roof over the kitchen caved in, which was really a disaster. The Mai Kai had been able to really do great during the pandemic. They were open, the show was going on every night. And then in October, it was over basically. But as the Mai Kai has done for forever, they survive, they find a way. And they started doing these parking lot events. We had the Halloween party with a drive-in horror movie. We had the anniversary party. We even had Joyce Spence record a special greeting to the Mai Kai that we played up on the big screen during the Halloween, and that was great. And at all these events, you got your gallons to go, and you were able to hang out and socially distance in your car, and it's kept us sane and kept us plugged into the Mai Kai. But what it also allowed me to do, unknowingly, at the end of the year, at the anniversary event, I said, what the hell? Let me get a gallon. I asked the manager, can you give me a gallon of rum barrel without the rum? And he thought I was crazy, but he did it anyway. That gallon there on the left it's in the orange juice jug. That's the orange juice they use. Kennesaw, it's a fresh squeezed local juice, but there's no rum in that barrel. So what I wanted to do is take that barrel with no rum and start making my own barrels with Kohala Bay, with Appleton Punch, and that was a lot of fun. And I celebrated New Year's Eve with my Kohala Bay and Appleton Punch rum barrels. But simultaneous to all this going on, there was a couple people emailing me with these interesting blends. They said, we've been working on this. We've got this possible Kohala Bay blend. So I got a couple of them in the email. So I thought, well, I've got this gallon, so maybe I should try another blind tasting. It's been 2 years. My liver's recovered, so.
Hey, Jim, real quick.
Yeah.
Real quick, on that Kennesaw orange juice, somebody had asked in the chat what the Mai Kai uses for grapefruit juice. And I know they get all their juices from Kennesaw, correct?
Yes, they probably use a Kennesaw juice that's, it's squeezed. If you go to the Kennesaw website, you'll see there's no preservatives. It's not homogenized. It comes fresh. It's very pulpy juice. You can get the orange in the stores. I think Whole Foods in Florida has it. Unfortunately, the white grapefruit is only for commercial use. I have never seen that in the store. So the Mai Kai gets it, and whoever else uses white grapefruit gets it. But I've seen the red grapefruit from Kennesaw in the stores, and it's good. It's very pulpy, and it's not like any canned or commercial grapefruit. But the Mai Kai changes seasonally, like some other places. I think Smuggler's Cove also changes their grapefruit. If red's in season, they'll use red. If white's in season, they'll use white. But it's always fresh.
All right. Back to the show.
Yes, back to the show.
Sorry for the divergence there.
No, that's okay. I just want to look at my notes and see if I forgot anything before we get into the big finale here.
Okay.
The blind tasting, I decided I need to taste these two new blends, and here they are. These are the two submitted blends by fans of the Atomic Grog. Kohala Bay on the left there. That's what you're shooting for. So blend number one is all Jamaican. It looked interesting. It was unlike anything I'd ever tried before. It had the Ray Nephew overproof, which inexplicably nobody had suggested before. Blend number 2 is kind of similar to some of the previous ones, but it was heavy on the Karuba. And I was kind of skeptical, 1 part lemon heart, but who knows, let me try it. So to properly do this, however, I had to compare this not only to Kohala Bay, I think I had to go back and look at all those other suggested tribute blends. So there were just so many of them. I had to narrow it down. So, you know,
I think what makes these 2 new blends interesting is if, you know, we haven't really, we've talked about kind of the stats of, you know, Dagger to Appleton Punch to Dagger and Kohala Bay.
right.
But, you know, the profile of Kohala Bay is it's molassesy with a little bit of pot still,
Yeah.
and slightly above, you know, standard proof. Which, you know, Karuba, which we've talked about a little bit, you know, on its own, isn't quite there, but it does
Right.
have that heavy molasses flavor. It's
Right.
just a little bit light. So both of these blends here
Yeah.
are upping the proof with, you know, the Ray Nephew overproof and the lemon heart to get the proof up to that 43.
Yeah, they're basically both Karuba on steroids. Do you want to, let's sip it now. Is now a good time? We're not going to tell you which one. We're not going to tell you which one it is, but the second rum that you have is one of these 2. So maybe that could be a challenge if people can figure out which of the 2 that it is. We'll reveal it at the end.
So go ahead and taste Kohala Bay blend number 2 if you haven't already.
I already drank a whole rum barrel of it. Sorry.
I told you there was a lot to get through.
I'm 10 ounces in. We're good.
It's real funky on the it's real funky on the Jamaican. It's very dark. It's spot on. I mean, when I tasted both of these blends, I was so surprised.
So who came up with these blends?
Two anonymous home bartenders, and we'll reveal one of them later. But so I designed this whole system where I was going to do it. By now I have this down to a science. I wanted to do these blind tastings. So over the course of several weeks, I took it upon myself to expand even to the single rums. So I wanted to see, oh, maybe there's some new single rums I need to try. So I tested 11 single rums and 8 multi-rum blends, including the three new ones and 5 of the best from the past. So what I ended up with is breaking this all down into a final grouping, which we're going to see on the next couple of slides. So I have the tier 1s, the tier 2s, and the tier 3s. Believe it or not, in the tier 2, some of these single rums came in pretty strong. So this is going to be a surprise. The tier 1s are no surprise, but it was very close. The tier 3s are on the next screen. We'll see that next. But I was trying to compare them to Kohala Bay as I went, and you know, I had a series of tests with doing daiquiris, as well as sipping them neat, as well as mixing them in the rum barrel. So it did take me weeks, and I probably gained 20 pounds. So here we go. Here's the scorecard on the tier 3s and the tier 2s. The tier 3s are these multi-rum blends that just don't quite make it to the top. It's some of the ones we've seen before. The first one is a new one I came up with on the fly. I love Hamilton Navy, and I said, you know, I'm doing all this work. Maybe I should come up with a Hamilton Navy blend. So I mixed in 2 parts of Karuba. It's good. It's very good. It's in the running there. I think it's just as good as any of those others that I've posted on the blog before. So those are your tier 3s. And I did this blind tasting with you see the stem glasses. Those are probably rum barrels, but on the bottom of each glass I have a number, and the number corresponds to the bottles. And I was trying to really not know what I was drinking. I did the same thing with some single rums, and some new ones came into the spotlight. Denizen Merchant's Reserve we've all known about, and that's always been a solid contender. It continues to be a solid contender. If you're looking for one rum to just grab a bottle of, I highly recommend Denizen Merchant's Reserve. It works. The Florida Rum Society blend from Hamilton is a new one. and it's excellent. I've heard rumors that it's coming to Texas from Ed, so keep an eye out for that. It's a mix of Guyana and Jamaican rums. It clocks in at 90 proof, so it's right in the wheelhouse. You know, Denizen is 86 proof, so proof wise, those are both great contenders. Jack Tar is an oddball, and you're probably not going to find that. So it's a rum that somebody gifted to me. It's an 86 proof pure Jamaican rum. Unfortunately, it's bottled and sold in South Africa, so it's hard to find in the States. But it's another good one. And the Money Musk Gold is my unsung hero. It's a 80 proof gold rum that really, you know, outperforms its price point. I think that's, if you're looking for a cheap one bottle gold Jamaican rum, I think the Money Musk is a great one. So
that one is available in Texas. I've not had it yet, but I have seen the Money Musk at Austin Shaker for anyone interested.
So I guess, do we need a drum roll, or do we want to reveal the top tier? And these are the top tier best blends, and to no surprise, Eldorado Smith & Cross is there. The old #2 blend of Appleton Hamilton is still there. I actually put Hamilton in there in place of Lemon Heart 151, and it really improved the blend. And the 2 new blends. It was so close, I had to repeatedly drink rum barrels. Poor me. Look how much is left there in my gallon. But I compared them to Kohala Bay, and I really couldn't decide. I'm of the opinion that all 4 of these are equally good, and I'm going to post that on the blog very soon. That you can't go wrong with any of these 4. I don't know if you have both of the blends in front of you to sip right now. It's really hard to say one is better than the other. They're both equally good, I think.
Yeah,
but
they're very different, but they're both they both work in cocktails.
Yeah, but you might be asking yourself, well, I thought you were keeping score. I thought you're scoring all these rums. Well, I did keep score, and this is an exclusive to the Austin Rum Society. I don't know if I'm going to post this, but there is a score. And on the very next slide, we're going to see what the scores are.
What?
The #1 blend was the Ray and Nephew Overproof Appleton Signature Karuba blend created by this guy here. And it came in at 4.73 in my ratings. I rated it exhaustively. I did 6 different scores in various categories, and it came out 0.02 ahead of the second new blend, which we're not tasting tonight, but I encourage you to try that if you can. So there you go. Take a bow, Mike.
Thank you. So I want to thank Dane and Julie, because a couple months ago I was over at their place, and we were just kind of talking about the whole Kohala Bay situation and the blends, and it never sat right with me that we're using Eldorado 12 and Smith & Cross for a number of reasons. First and foremost, cost. Those are each $30 bottles of rum, and even if you bought one of each, poured it into this plastic jug of Kohala Bay, you're in it for $60 and you're still 20 ounces short. So economically, it doesn't make sense, since Kohala Bay was a $25 rum. Also, Kohala Bay was a purely Jamaican rum. So why are we putting Eldorado or a Demerara rum in it to begin with at all? And thirdly, Kohala Bay, going back to Dagger, was always made from Ray and Nephew. So why aren't we looking at what Ray and Nephew's offerings are today and coming up with something? And like what Jim said, when everybody tries to up the proof on their blends, they're using Lemon Heart or Hamilton 151 or OFTD or any other variety of overproof. No one thought to use Ray and Nephew White Overproof, which is kind of astonishing. I mean, that is pure quintessential, mostly pot still Jamaican rum. So I kind of started playing with numbers at first. I was just doing calculations, and I'm like, well, you know, Kohala Bay is a very specific proof. You know, 43.8? I don't have any funny, 43.8 or 43.6. And I was like, how do they come up with that? So I just started, I'm like, well, and looking at the profile as well, I'm like, well, I hadn't had it in my mouth in like 5 years, and Dana and Julie shared a sample with me. And in my head, it was super funky. It was a higher proof. And when I tasted it, I was like, this is not at all as I remember it. This is, you know, it's very molassesy. It's slightly funky.
Go to that next screen with the breakdown. You got the breakdown on the next screen.
Okay, cool. There we go.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a blend of pot and column still, lightly aged, 43.8%, and it's inexpensive. All these rums can be had for very cheaply. But yeah, like, you know, the Kohala Bay is not a funk bomb. That's not what it is. So when you're taking something super funky like Smith & Cross, and you're adding something that has a lot of age like Eldorado 12, the components just don't add up to what Kohala Bay was.
Right.
It was just an inexpensive mixing rum with a little bit of funk, you know, coloring added. It was molassesy. And that goes back to, you know, Karuba is a very molassesy rum. But it's unfortunately not, doesn't have enough pot still and doesn't have enough proof. So I you know, I did the math of, I think I started with 5 parts Karuba and 1 part Ray and Nephew or thereabouts, and or maybe it was 6 parts Karuba and 1 part Ray and Nephew, and it was just slightly above that 43.8. And I was like, okay, well, let me cut back 1 part Karuba. And I did the math before I even did the blend. And I tried it that way, and I'm like, it needs a little bit more body. It needs a little bit more refinement. It doesn't need a ton of age. So I didn't want to put like Appleton 12 into it, but I figured Appleton Signature gives it a little bit more of that character.
I would add that it also works just as fine with Appleton 8, but you're losing that budget friendly aspect of it.
Yeah. So all said and done, you know, you're looking at your a 1 ounce pour, you know, your pour cost is like 76 cents an ounce with this blend. So it's still not as cheap as what Kohala Bay was, but it fits the profile. It's the right character. It's cheap and easy to produce because these rums, Karuba might be the outlier, but you know, these rums should be pretty readily available everywhere.
Yeah.
So when I first came up with this idea, and thank, you know, Dan and Julie poured me, you know, besides the sample I had at their house, they gave me a little bottle that I can bring home so I can do some comparative tastings. And thank you for that, because I started playing around. I sent it to Jim. I sent him this you know, not even just like an email. It was like a giant story of why the other one was wrong. And I didn't hear from you for like a long time. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to try it. And, you know, months and months went by and I didn't hear anything. I didn't know. I was like, okay, maybe he hates my blend. I didn't realize. And then you mentioned you were doing all these taste comparisons, and I didn't know until this week that, that mine was the #1 winner. Yay!
Well, I wasn't sure because the other one was just as good. I don't want to downplay the other one was damn good, and I wasn't sure. I didn't want to just go willy-nilly. That's why I had to come up with a statistical analysis to really prove, you know. But I mean, pretty much they're all good. But yeah, statistically, you came out on top.
Yeah. So statistically, mine is the only one that is 100% pure Jamaican.
Yes.
You know, all these check marks here. Mine is the only one that fits the box of the profile of, or not the profile, but the stats of what Kohala Bay was.
Exactly.
And the proof is exact. It's the 43.8%.
But no, the real test is to put it in a barrel, which I think we should do next.
We should. All right. I'm sure some of you have already ventured into your second cocktail. I have not. I, in fact, have not even had a rum barrel with my blend in it before. So I'm going to go mix that up. I'm going to step away for a couple minutes.
Me too.
Okay. So y'all can unmute and talk amongst yourselves if you wish. And I'll be back in a few.
Mike, I have to tell you that what do you think? Your blend is great in this barrel, right?
I enjoy it. So I was trying to segue back to that. I want to hear people's opinions because this is the first time I had my blend in a barrel. I came up with the blend as just kind of a experiment, and I haven't put it in drinks yet. I haven't put it to the test. came up with it. I think it's good.
It's perfect because it doesn't dominate. It's there, but it's great. Yeah.
I've been making Mai Kai drinks for a very long time. Always my top of my list. Like the Mai Kai's Zombie, 151 Swizzle, Cobra's Kiss. All like my favorite tiki drinks of all time. Thanks, Jim, like for those recipes. Like seriously. Man, yeah, this new blend in this rum barrel. Like I've been using this Smith & Cross Eldorado for, I don't know, 5 years. And for this rum barrel, it's way better for me, and cheaper rums.
Yeah.
Wow, super awesome.
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard to beat. Mike, why don't you throw that last slide up there just for the hell of it? We have a couple more drinks suggestions, and then we can get back to questions.
Drinks for tonight, you mean? We haven't had enough.
or
now go and make these.
Okay, we can be right back, Bill.
Mike recommends the 151 Swizzle. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, when that's one I think Jim's done at least 6 versions of.
Right.
As he learns more things, like the fact that the Mai Kai does not use cinnamon syrup, which is insane because it's in a lot of the tribute recipes he's come up with. He'll adapt as the rums that they use or the syrups that they have change. Jim will adjust the recipes. Thankfully, he keeps the old ones up because version 4 of the 151 Swizzle is my desert island favorite, like top drink in the world. If I was only allowed to drink one thing for the rest of life, it would be this drink. I highly recommend you guys make this. It's absolutely phenomenal.
Favorite drink ever too. Right.
Yeah, there are 6 versions now. Yeah. And my recommended is Kohala Bay, which is very kind of under the radar. It's a tribute to the Mai Kai's drink of the same name, which was on the 56 menu, but lost to time. It's Montego Bay by Don Beach. He had a drink called Montego Bay. And this is the Mai Kai's version. It's got all those great flavors in there, the honey, the bitters. It's got the pimento. And I would say just go for it and do 2 ounces of the Kohala Bay blend instead of, the original has 1 ounce of gold and 1 ounce of dark Jamaican, but it's a tribute to Jamaica. So I think it's a great drink to try with this blend. And my shameless plug to go to my blog to get more recipes. So.
Jim, this barrel is really excellent. I'd only had the barrel recipe that you posted before this one, so my compliments to both Mike and Jim.
Yeah,
impressive blend, and I haven't had this barrel recipe. I made the one before this, but really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think Ross, you had made me this new recipe when it first came out at your house.
Yeah,
one time.
when Jim first posted it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I've not had this recipe otherwise.
Blend. Absolutely.
But
Just
yeah,
everything
everyone
came together with it.
What do you all think comparatively? Which barrel? Being that you're comparing the same recipe with one blend to the other, what is your preferences?
Yours.
Yeah, it might be all in my head, but I do prefer the second blend, and I believe that I prefer the second barrel.
There's a reason we put 6 ounces of rum in your belly before we gave you this blend.
Off in the
That's what I was
audience.
about to say. I'm like, I think I might have screwed up the second one and forgot like some lime juice or something because it tasted just quite off, but it's still good.
Yeah, I mean,
I will drink Mike's rum barrel all night.
Yeah, I mean, I've used.
Mike was operating totally on muscle memory.
Yeah, I've used the Kohala Bay blend #1 for years and years and years, and didn't question it because it was ideal. That's why it kept being #1 on Jim's list every time he had other suggestions thrown his way. It was really mainly a thing of cost, that it was just so expensive to put that blend in. One other thing I didn't touch on yet. I talked about how the new blend is 100% Jamaican. A lot of the drinks at the Mai Kai that have Kohala Bay also have a Demerara rum component to it. So say, like the 151 Swizzle version 4 has 1 ounce of Lemon Heart 151 or Hamilton 151 and 1 ounce Kohala Bay blend. But if your Kohala Bay blend is 50% Eldorado 12 and 50% Smith & Cross, now 3/4 of your drink is Demerara rum. So you're losing that Jamaican component. So that was one of the things that drew my attention. I'm like, well, if most of these drinks that have Kohala Bay also have Demerara rum, and half of our Kohala Bay is Demerara, we're you know, something isn't lining up there. So that's why I wanted to do an all Jamaican blend for cheap. I want to start wrapping it up because we've been going really long. There's a couple show and tell things I forgot to show, and then I want to talk about upcoming sessions. Okay, so when we were talking about the Dagger and their advertisement and promotion and the cloak and dagger glasses, I was fortunate enough on eBay years back. I found a set of 3 of these, and I was so excited because I had it on my search for so long looking for these, and I was like, well, 3 sucks, but I'll buy it just to have some. And like 2 weeks later, somebody had a set of 5. So I have a complete set of 8, and I paid more than the dollar that they were back in the 30s or 40s. But these are some of my all-time favorite glasses. Whenever I make like a planter's punch or something, I'll put them in these. I've also got one of the Derby Daiquiri glasses.
Oh yeah,
jockey
wow.
on it.
Where'd you find that?
I actually, Carl, did you give me this? Carl, are you still on?
I'm still on. Sorry, I was muted.
Did you give me this Derby Daiquiri glass?
I did, and I found it. So back when I started collecting mugs and stuff, because I have a pretty extensive Trader Vic's collection. Back when I started, and obviously Imperial Glass did those as well as all the stemware for Vic's, the Tiki stemware. And so years ago, before eBay, like people started really kind of scouring eBay, you could type in like odd searches. Like you could type in like little yellow man like glass, and stuff like that would come up, and you could find them pretty easily for fairly cheap. So when Mike told me he was looking for one, I kind of did one of my little odd searches, basically just kind of describing it as someone who wouldn't understand what the hell it was would describe it, and found one and gave it to Mike for his birthday a few years ago.
Brilliant. With friends like those. Huh?
I've made many a Derby Daiquiri in it. I love it, and it's hard. Like the sculpt is not wonderful. It's hard to tell which side is front and back. You can vaguely like make out a butt on one side.
Gotta hate when that happens.
The mold. I've also got
in the back.
Got one of these guys. Or I've got a couple of these guys actually. So this is the official Mai Kai decanter. It states in the front that you can't really read. So yeah, when Puerto Rican rum was a big thing at Mai Kai with the Mariano Licudine, it says El Dorado on the back of this, but this is a Don Q Puerto Rican rum. And I did read recently when I was doing the research on Port Morant for our last session, how not sure if it was DDL or one of the companies or Diamond or whoever in Guyana had to buy the trademark to the name El Dorado because Don Q back in the 50s and 60s was using it on this rum. So this once upon a time had rum in it. I love this guy. Thank you, Jim. Really appreciate all the work you put into this and all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a lot of fun.
Everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
I might be lurking at some of your future events. Look for me.
Come on.
Thanks so much. It was awesome. Great presentation.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you.
Likewise.
Take care. Nice to meet y'all, all the newbies.